Being a highly sensitive person or neurodivergent in other ways, we may have grown up feeling misunderstood and even like we were flawed. The first section of this audio is an excerpt from a podcast episode with Julie Bjelland and Willow McIntosh, followed by a short section with Dr. Aimie Apigian on how trauma relates to these feelings. See the notes for more information and resources.
And I was just thinking about the journey of kind of figuring out my area of expertise and the work that I've done over the years, and how long, well, not necessarily how long, but how important it is, I think, for us as HSPs to get in the area that we really love and kind of experience ourselves in our value, not necessarily in the area that we're meant to work in necessarily, but I think because we are challenged a lot by feeling different when we're growing up and we get, the wrong messages, sometimes we can misunderstand what our value is and try to be like others and try to find our value in the same way others do. And I was just thinking about my own journey of really coming through that and taking ownership of that. And I think, it's just such an important piece for us to practice being seen for what we love and being seen in our value. And it's certainly been probably one of the most challenging things that I've had to overcome. And it's like a constant evolution, there's more experience of the value and kind of, wow, okay, this is really me. And oh my gosh, I love doing this. And the more it kind of grows and the more we sort of allow that to evolve, I think.
Yeah, there's not really like a roadmap necessarily, because you have like these special gifts and you're discovering how you can support people with these gifts. So you're kind of creating your own roadmap and evolving as you go, which is, I think a lot of us end up doing, right, in our work.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Actually, as HSPs, there isn't necessarily a roadmap. A society doesn't have a roadmap for us necessarily as it does for everyone else. And really, we do have to figure that out and trust our intuition to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I had like these really opposite experiences this week, which kind of made me think it'd be such an interesting thing to talk about, because I had this experience of feeling really misunderstood. And then I also had this experience of feeling like a really strong sense of belonging, like in two different experiences. And I was like, wow, this would be an interesting thing to talk about, because, how many of us listening have felt misunderstood? So many of us have felt that. Yeah, I was already I've been doing a lot of like thinking around, as we've been talking about before, about grief and things like that too. And this whole idea of companionship with grief, that there isn't this sense of that you reach a point where you're done, but it's more about this evolving acceptance of this is a part of my experience and it's connecting me to some really deep parts of myself. And so I've, as we talked about before, about that kind of like stacking of challenges. So my mom's husband called and said that he had received her ashes. So she had actually donated her body to science, which I think is such an amazing thing that she did that was her wish. And then that kind of hit me hard, the idea of her ashes. That just hit me hard, that experience. And also, so stacked on top of that, so I was already feeling kind of tender. And I've had this relative who I've had some challenges around and some boundaries around in terms of, when you have somebody in your life that where you feel really misunderstood by, it can be such a painful thing. And especially if it's like a relative that you sort of have to have in your life in certain ways. So it's like we hadn't communicated very much for 6 months or longer. And they reached out and wanted to have like a healing conversation. And I thought, well, maybe it's time that we start doing that. And we met. But in the process of that, it just became clear to me that I was not going to be understood by this person. There was going to be a continual misunderstanding. So that in the sense that it made me just feel really bad. I just felt kind of icky and I felt bad. And I thought, this is not healthy. This is not a healthy experience for me. And I think that so many times as sensitive people and as neurodivergent people that we have that experience where we feel really misunderstood, but we sort of like force ourselves into these relationships with people in our families or people around us. But I'm hoping that by talking about this today, it really helps people understand that it is okay to, and sometimes necessary, to set boundaries around how much you give to someone, because there is, like, we can try to be understood. We can do the things that we can on our end to be understood, but there becomes a point at which we might get clear that we're not going to be understood, and that is going to be a continual experience. And it actually became harmful for me, especially my tenderness at this stage of life where I'm at right now at this season of life. So that was really painful to experience. But I also had this experience just a couple days after that, just a few days after that, where we had our first meeting, like group in the Autistic Women's Group, where we all met via video. And wow. It was so beautiful, Willow. Like, talk about a sense of belonging. Like, I even felt that. It was just the sense of like we were all late discovered autistic women, and that in itself instantly bonds us, you know, because it's a completely unique experience to us. And it was really bonding. It made me realize, like, I think it's going to be very healthy to spend time together. So I'm actually going to kind of planning on doing something where we're going to have like the same people meet for 6 weeks, like every week for 6 weeks. I just think it'd be so bonding. It's so healing for all of us to have that time together. So I was thinking about that difference of the sense of the feeling of being misunderstood in the world and the feeling of this sense of being understood and a sense of belonging, and like how we need to actually seek that out. We need to seek that out and have that in our life more, and have boundaries around areas where we don't feel that, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you're touching on something very important here. You know, I think, especially for us as HSPs, you know, because we're having such an in-depth experience, and what we value in our hearts is so important to us. And if we're trying to communicate that, and we're trying to communicate the importance of that, when that need isn't met, or when that awareness isn't met, then there's often that sense that, well, is there something wrong with me here, or should I adjust to try to fit into the other person's perspective, and therefore diminish my needs and diminish what's actually really important to me? And I think, you know, it's something that we have to be really aware of as HSPs. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, you're extremely aware of your own needs and your feelings, and how difficult it is when there's a family member, especially, that we can't necessarily, you know, communicate that with. But I think it's an opportunity for us to recognize just how important our own needs are and our values are, and how that is connected with our identity. And if someone else doesn't get it, then it doesn't necessarily mean we have to insist that they do, or it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with us if they don't, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trauma recovery physician and teacher Aimie Apigian, MD.
Today we're talking about trauma, and specifically the effects of trauma on the fear of being seen, the fear of being seen for who we truly are, the fear of truly being known. And trauma results in this belief that we are different, that we're not enough, that there's something about us that pushes people away, or that we're too much for other people. And so if they were to truly know us, all parts of us, then they would leave us, then they would kick us out, then they would reject us, abandon us. And those feelings of being abandoned and being different are so painful that our system responds in a self-protective way and tells us that we just should not be seen, should not be known, and it puts up walls and facades in order to protect us from being seen and being truly known. And so those who experienced early childhood attachment trauma still find themselves in adulthood having these moments, having these situations where they want to run and hide. Even in their career, they're professionals, they're otherwise successful, and they go to put themselves out there, go to promote their work. Maybe they've done creative work, written a book, whatever it is. And now it's time to promote themselves. If it's something that they did authentically that really showed their heart, they can have this response, even as an adult, that little child response of, I need to run and hide, this isn't safe, they'll see me for who I really am, they'll make fun of me, they'll criticize me, they'll leave me, they'll abandon me. And so this fear of being seen and being known can persist well into adulthood, that had its origins in early childhood attachment trauma. We know that in response to trauma, our nervous system gets wired for hypervigilance and for self-protection. It starts to see threats everywhere in the world, and so has developed these mechanisms and wired these mechanisms so efficiently so that in response to any situation, the smallest of things, it can immediately put us into that survival response of fight, flight, run away, or freeze.
Thanks for listening. See the Creative Mind post for this podcast episode with links to resources and other material.